Kino, and welcome once again to Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Once again with your favorite host, the one and only Cave Cat. Do you remember when I reviewed Adventures from the Book of Virtues for the very first episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews? Well, for my next review, I'll be reviewing another PBS series, albeit one that aired several years before Book of Virtues did. Do you remember Reading Rainbow? You know, the live-action children's series that was hosted by LeVar Burton, aka Geordi LaForge from Star Trek The Next Generation? Well, it turns out that during the time that the show was about to start its 10th season, there was another live-action PBS series that also dealt with reading stories, just like Reading Rainbow, albeit slightly different. What's the show? It's Kino's Storytime, or just shortened to Storytime. Kino's Storytime first premiered on PBS back in September of 1992, probably meant to either be similar in quality to Reading Rainbow or to compete against it. Anyway, the show focuses on the main puppet character, Kino, performed and voiced by the late Mark Ritz, whom a lot of you might recognize for playing the part of Lester the lab rat from Beakman's World. But moving on, the show focuses on Kino, a young, quote-unquote, boy who often expresses a love in reading stories or listening to stories by his two female companions, Lucy and Mara. Please don't take that the wrong way. Anyway, they typically read 2, 3, or even 4 stories per episode. One similarity that this show shares with Reading Rainbow is the fact that, like the latter, this show also employs quite a vast array of various celebrity guest stars that show up to read stories as well. However, the only difference between that is that while Reading Rainbow typically has one celebrity or more read a single story that makes up the bulk of the episode, along with having 3 kids each review their favorite stories at a time, Kino's Storytime usually has either Kino, Mara, or Lucy read one story before 1 or 2 celebrities show up to read a story as well. The quality of the episodes differs depending on whether Lucy or Mara appear in the episode with Kino, even though earlier episodes of the series had both Lucy and Mara appear in the same episode with Kino. If Lucy appears in an episode with Kino, the typical setup is this. Kino will either be engaged in some kind of activity or experience a problem of some kind, and after telling Lucy about it, it would remind Lucy of a similar story that corresponds with the exact same situation at hand. Then after Lucy finishes reading the story, she and Kino will receive a visit from a visiting celebrity guest star, who for the most part is usually accompanied by a small group of children, and then he or she would also read a story to the children and Kino as well. If Mara appears in an episode with Kino, it goes like this. Sometimes Kino and Mara will talk with a visiting celebrity about a topic of some kind, before that celebrity will also proceed to read a story as well. Either that or the visiting celebrity will also read a story before a large crowd of children in an area known as the Reader's Circle, with Kino and Mara in attendance as well. Although sometimes, however, Mara will also read a story to Kino, and also to a small group of children as well. So yeah, that's basically how the formula for the show works. As a kid, I didn't really watch this show too much, preferring to watch Reading Rainbow, but years later, this show suddenly came to me, so I decided to revisit it in order to find out what I missed out on. Although a few years ago, there weren't very many episodes of the show up on YouTube, until back in the summer of 2021, which was 2 years ago, a YouTube user by the name of Betamax VHS Super 8 had uploaded nearly every single episode of Kino's Storytime to YouTube. Once that happened, I got a chance to watch a good amount of episodes of the show, even recognizing quite a few parts I remember seeing from the very few episodes that I saw on TV as a kid. In fact, one episode actually featured the book Jamberry, a book that I remember reading quite a number of times at my elementary school's public library when I was younger. Looking back at the show, it makes me wonder if any of the celebrity actors that guest starred in the show, the ones that are still alive of course, have any memory of ever appearing on the show after all of those years. Anyway, this also brings to mind another question. If Kino's Storytime is supposed to either be similar to Reading Rainbow or at least compete against it, then how is it that Reading Rainbow was able to last for 21 seasons while Kino's Storytime only lasted for 3 seasons? Even more jarring about this is the fact that the first season of Kino's Storytime lasted within a span of roughly 2 years. I tried to find info about why this is, but so far my search came up nothing. But I think I could probably surmise that in the terms of ratings, even though Kino's Storytime did fairly well in the ratings against Reading Rainbow, the latter show seemed to be more popular and more watched than Kino's Storytime. So because of that, Kino's Storytime ended up getting the kibosh in 1997, while Reading Rainbow would get picked up for its 17th season a year later in 1998. Such a shame too, because even if Kino Storytime tried so hard to compete against Reading Rainbow, it was actually an enjoyable little show that encouraged children to become interested in reading books and going to the library, just like Reading Rainbow. Since I found myself enjoying the show for what it is, it gets a good score from me, that score being 9 stars. While it didn't last as long or was as widely popular as Reading Rainbow was, I still feel that Kino Storytime was a great show that influenced children to become interested in reading. And even in spite of the fact that I didn't watch the show on TV as much as Reading Rainbow, I feel proud to have been able to watch a few episodes. With all that said and done, that's it for this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Be sure to stay tuned to my YouTube channel for whatever video I come up with next, whether it's another episode or something else. Until next time, later!